This conference will now be recorded.
We're going to be in the 14th chapter of 1 Samuel. So, you guys online, whoops, I missed something there. Somebody chatted. Aaron has an announcement. He says, anybody who'd like to attend, LCU Choir will be having a concert tomorrow evening at 7:30 p.m. at the McDonald Moody Auditorium on LCU campus. The concert will also be live streamed on the LCU Choir's Facebook page. All right. Well, if anybody can do that tomorrow evening at 7:30, that would probably be a good thing to do.
Where's that at?
It's in Lubbock Christian University. Yeah, LCU. So we're in chapter 14. And just a reminder of what happened in chapter 14 before where we are today. We're going to be starting at like verse 23 or we're on the 14th chapter. We're going to be starting at verse 24. But just a reminder of what we talked about last time. Well, 2 times ago. Last time we talked about Easter and the Passion of the Christ and the different stages that Jesus went through on the way to the cross. And but today we're getting back into 1 Samuel. But what we talked about last time was that Saul was given the command by God to go and wipe out the Philistines. He hadn't been doing that. He was resting. He was sitting under a pomegranate shade tree, doing nothing. Jonathan, his son, who had heard the same command to do it, he and his armor bearer, who I can't remember what we called the armor bearer, but Aaron came up with the name for him, but I can't remember what it was. But Gary, yeah, Gary and Jonathan went, and the 2 of them defeated 20 people at a garrison of the Philistines. And then that defeat of those 2 people defeating those 20 ended up causing the Philistine army to be routed at that time. So that's where we left it off, is the Philistines are being routed and they're leaving. The Hebrews are chasing. It's just been this great victory that God has given the people. So where we are today, if we were to look at this is Saul. So we're looking at Saul and some of his leadership right now, because Saul didn't do anything in this previously. At the beginning of chapter 14, he was supposed to be overtaking the Philistines and conquering them. He didn't. His son Jonathan went out and did it. And now Saul, now that the battle is going well and they're chasing the people down, Saul now is going to begin trying to lead the Hebrew people. And this is poor leadership, is what, if we could put a title on this Bible study, is, how not to lead. Or, keys to not leading would be a good one for this. But most of y'all have probably heard this story before, but we'll hit it just right off. But we're going to start at 1 Samuel 24 through 26. It said, now the men of Israel were pressed to exhaustion that day because Saul had placed them under an oath. Okay, so the men, they were chasing the Philistine people down. They were pursuing them. They were conquering them. But Saul had put them under an oath. And that oath that Saul had put them under was they were hard pressed. Some of your translations might say they were hard pressed, but my translation says they were pressed to exhaustion that day, because this is the oath he said. He's going to make 3 oaths in this section that we're going to be reading today. But this is the first of his 3 oaths that he made. He said, let a curse fall on anyone who eats before evening, before I have full revenge on my enemy. So no one ate anything all day. So just to look at that oath that he put on there, what do y'all notice when I read this again? Let a curse fall on anyone who eats anything before evening, before I have full revenge on my enemies. So no one ate anything all day. Does anything stand out to y'all in that, on what Saul said?
He's not the one exerting, so it's like easy for him to keep it.
Yeah. One, he's not the one exerting, so it's easy for him to say that. He's probably laying back and watching all the people go off to do it. He probably did fight some, but so the people are already exhausted, and to fight in a battle, I mean, especially that kind of battle when it's hand-to-hand combat and every person you come up to, it's a fight. It's not really like it is now where guns do most of I mean, very rarely do people get into hand-to-hand combat anymore with the weapons that we have. But this was hand-to-hand combat place to place. So it takes a lot of energy. It takes a whole lot of energy to fight. And he's saying, I'm not going to give you any energy. You can't have any energy. You can't eat anything to go out and fight that. And then also in this, he says, let a curse fall on anyone who eats before evening, before I have full revenge on my enemies. And Saul is making this about him here. I want to revenge my enemies. And really, this is God's deal. And it should have said something like, let's go out and get them and get revenge for God against his enemy. But Saul is putting it on him, and he's making it personal. And what he's doing here is he's trying to look better than he is. Jonathan's the one that went out there and conquered the people, and then the Philistines started killing each other, and the Philistines began to be routed. So now Saul all of a sudden jumps in there and he makes it about him. He makes it about himself. So he says, before I have full revenge on my enemies. So no one ate all that day, even though they had found all found honeycomb on the ground in the forest. Verse 25. What does y'all's translation say on that verse 25? Do y'all have anything different than not? No, on 25. 14:25.
The entire army entered the woods, and there was honey on the ground?
And there was honey on the ground. Yeah, the entire, some translation said, and the ground was covered with honey. And the way they say this, it implies that, there was honey everywhere. It almost reminds you of the manna being on the ground, that you could go out, because normally honeycomb's hard to find. There's not, just swarms of bees everywhere, right? If to have honeycomb just covering the ground would mean that you would have to have literally millions and millions and millions of bees to do that. So it's almost like, I don't think almost like, but Saul says don't eat, and God says, dude, that's dumb. Y'all need to eat. And it's like God provided all of this honeycomb for them to eat. It was like manna that was on the ground. And so they went out there, and all this honeycomb's everywhere on the ground, and the people aren't eating it. And they didn't dare touch the honey because they all feared the oath that they had taken. So one of the things that stands out to me in this is Saul is imposing expectations on them. He's being very legalistic. He's saying y'all have to do this, and if you do this, then this will happen. And that just really kind of reeks of legalism on what the problems that we have in our church today, is that so many times it's like, well, if I do all this, and if I make it to where I suffer, or stuff like that, there's this legalism to it, and it's really not about an inward thing. It's not about something inward. It's all outward. It's about how you look to other people. Saul was more concerned about how he looked to others and how they felt, and he was imposing legalism on there. And legalism it's a horrible thing, because it's more about rules than it is relationship. And so that's real bad on what he did there, right there at the very beginning. But in verse 27, but Jonathan had not heard his father's command, and he dipped the end of his stick into a piece of honeycomb, and he ate the honey. Right, this is one thing that Jonathan hadn't heard the command, but Jonathan had been with his people the whole time, right? He had been out, he started the fight, right? He started the fight, so he'd been out there fighting, and he'd been out there chasing them with them. So he had to see the people that followed up and caught up with him, because what they were doing is they were killing the people and they were taking all their stuff. And he had to look around and notice, man, they're not eating anything. They just, just got this whole tent full of stuff, and nobody's reaching in and grabbing a piece of beef jerky and eating on it. Nobody's reaching into their satchel and eating it. And he probably could hear the people saying, oh my gosh, look at all this honey on the ground. We can't even eat it. So it'd be kind of silly to think that Jonathan hadn't picked up on that at some point, because he was out there leading them in, and nobody's eating. But so you'd think that Jonathan probably knew that the people weren't eating, and he noticed it. But he defiantly reaches out and he dips the end of a stick into a piece of honeycomb, and he ate it. And he picked it up and he ate it. And essentially I think he was knowingly saying, that's dumb, that's dumb. We have to eat in this situation. And after he had eaten it, he felt refreshed. But one of the men saw him eat it, and he said, hey, your father made the army take a strict oath that anyone who eats food today will be cursed. That is why everyone is weary and faint. And Jonathan replies, my father has made trouble for us all, Jonathan exclaimed. A command like that only hurts us. See how refreshed I am now that I've eaten this little bit of honey. And when we look at that, Saul is not supposed to be making trouble for the people. He's supposed to be helping the people. He's the king. He's the leader. But instead of bringing help to the people, he's bringing trouble to them. He's making them fight without any energy, which is just ridiculous. I mean, can you imagine a football coach the night before a football game saying, hey, y'all don't eat anything for 18 hours before this game, because you're just gonna, no, they the deal with, they always eat a bunch of spaghetti and lasagna and a bunch of carbs so that they have a lot of stored energy when they go out and they fight or play the next day. He said, my father has made trouble for us all. And that's just the opposite of what Saul should be doing. A command like that will hurt us. So he's bringing trouble upon us, and he's also hurting us. And then he explains, see how refreshed I am now that I've eaten a little bit of this honey? So Jonathan, instead of listening to his dad, he looks around and says, man, there's so much honey on the ground. This has to be probably from God. This is crazy that there's this much honeycomb on the ground. And he takes it and he eats it, because I think he's the one that was trusting in God when he first went out with his armor bearer. And he was saying, God will deliver us. And I think this is the same mindset that Jonathan has right now, is this is God delivering us. What is God going to do? Oh my goodness, God showed up with all this honeycomb, and it's silly to not work with God and to work against him. Let me go to the next one. So verse 30, it says, if the men had been allowed to eat freely from the food they found among their enemies, think how many more Philistines we would have killed. This is the end of Jonathan's statement there in verse 30. He said, see how refreshed I am? See how much better I am? If we had been able to eat the plunder that we were taking, think about how much more energy we would have had to be able to chase them, and how many more of the Philistines we could have conquered and we could have killed. So they continued. They chased and killed the Philistines all day from Michmash to Aijalon. I don't even know how to say that, Aijalon, growing more and more faint. So here they are. They keep going, and nobody else is eating except Jonathan. And as they chase, can you imagine just running and running and running without any energy? And they grow more and more and more faint. That evening, okay, because the command, if you remember, the command was, so you can't eat anything until this evening. Let a curse fall on anyone that eats anything before evening, so I can get full revenge on my enemies. So this is what happens. They chased and killed the Philistines all day from Michmash to Aijalon, growing more and more faint. That evening, when it was legal for them to eat, they rushed the battle plunder and butchered the sheep and goats and calves, but they ate them without draining the blood. And that's a sin. Like if you go back to Leviticus, it says in Leviticus, it says point blank, don't eat the meat without draining the blood. So this legalism that Saul pushed on them to make himself look good, or to make himself look more authoritative, or make himself look more holy, or righteous, or whatever it was, this legalism that it put on him actually caused him to sin. And I really believe that can be applied today too. The more legalism that we put on people, that you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. We push this legal on instead of, I'm going to trust in God, and I'm going to focus on God and what God wants to do, and I'm going to have faith in God. I think the more legalism we put on people, it causes us to sin, and it causes us to stumble. It causes us to fall, because our focus is on what we're doing instead of what God's doing. And that's what happened. All of the people, they sinned. I mean, so we got to remember that all of the troops, they went up, they butchered the animals, and they're the ones that sinned. And I think that's interesting as we move on in this story. He said that evening, they drained the blood. Someone reported to Saul, look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat with the blood still in it. Saul says, that is very wrong. Find a large stone and roll it over here. Then go out among the troops and tell them, bring the cattle, sheep, goats here to me. Kill them here and drain the blood before you eat it. Do not sin against the Lord by eating meat with the blood still in it. So Saul, and I give him credit here. He says, okay, we need to do this right. We need to do this. Bring it over here, drain the blood. Let's eat it right. But Saul doesn't realize that the reason they're sinning is because of what he caused them to do. They wouldn't have done that if they hadn't have been starving, and all of a sudden it's evening. Well, now we can eat, and they went out and they sinned. Saul never realizes that he's the one that's at fault here. What do you say?
They were hungry.
They were very hungry. They were very hungry. He says, do not sin against the Lord by eating meat with the blood still in it. So that night, all the troops brought their animals and slaughtered them there. Then this is a real interesting verse 35. It says, then Saul built an altar to the Lord. And for an altar, when you build an altar to the Lord, that's a way that you worship and you offer sacrifices to God. Saul's been king for quite a while now. And then this sentence, it says, it was the first of the altars he had built to the Lord. If he really, as the king who was anointed, as we studied earlier, it wasn't God's idea to have a king, it was the people's idea. But you would think that the king would know that he needs to worship God. He should have built an altar the day he was anointed king and said, hey, this isn't about me, this is about God, and we're going to worship him and we're going to honor him. They've won 2 battles before this, and he should have worshiped God after God delivered them in those 2 battles. But this was the first of the altars he had built to the Lord. So I think this goes along with Saul trying to look good, because we found out in the previous Bible study, or 2 Bible studies ago, that Samuel, who was the priest of God, the prophet of God that spoke for God, he turned Saul away. He got fed up and he left. He said, man, you've brought this on yourself because you burnt the holy offerings to him when you weren't supposed to. And then now he's going and he's doing this. So he had all these opportunities to do it right, but now he's going to do it and he's doing it wrong. Or this might not be wrong to build an altar right now, but he hadn't done it before. So I think he's still just trying to look good in front of the people. And he's trying to make the people look bad. Y'all sinned, so now we have to worship because of y'all's sin. Well, really, it was his mistake that caused them to sin. So now we get to verse 36. It says, then Saul said, let's chase the Philistines all night and plunder them until sunrise. Let's destroy every last one of them. That's just abusive. It's like, you're going to fight all day and I'm not going to let you eat. And you've been fighting all day. So what are we going to do now? We're going to stay up all night and I'm not going to let you sleep, you know? And if you'd have let them eat in the day, they might have caught most of them. But instead, he's saying, I'm going to make you stay up all night. So I bet his people that were following him were like, you got to be kidding me. You know, most of them are dead anyway. And you're going to make us stay up all night and not sleep. You know, we're already, you know, what was that verse at the very beginning of this? They were already hard pressed. And now he's going to say, you can't get any rest either. So let's chase the Philistines all night and plunder them until sunrise. I bet the troops were like, oh boy, yeah, let's do, yeah, let's do that. Let's destroy every last one of them. His men replied, well, we'll do what you think is best. You know, well, okay, we'll do what you think is best. But the priest said this, and this isn't Solomon. I mean, this isn't Samuel, but this is a priest, and we don't know who this priest is, but there's a priest there. I do think it's significant that it's not Samuel, because Samuel is the one that's talking to God most, and he's the one that clearly in 1 Samuel is the one that God talks to. But a priest says this, and he has some good sense. He says, let's ask God first. So this priest says, hey, let's ask God first. So the the priest, probably Samuel, should have been the one asking God. He was the prophet. He wasn't there, but this priest. But Saul just jumps right in, and Saul says, so Saul asked God, should we go after the Philistines? Will you help us defeat them? So it probably should have been the priest that asked that. It probably should have been Samuel that should have been with Saul to ask that. But Saul just jumped in and he asked it. And then this next statement is pretty daunting. But God made no reply that day. You know, it's almost like God, it's not almost like God was saying, hey, you're doing this your way. You know, Jonathan's the one that was trusting in me and going out to see what I was going to do when he went and attacked that garrison with his armor bearer and everything that we talked about last time. But then you came up with these crazy plans to not eat and to not sleep and not eat the honey that I provide. So God gave no reply that day. Then Saul said to the leaders, then Saul says something to the leaders, something's wrong. I want all my commanders to come here. We must find out what sin was committed today. And nowhere in this does Saul ever consider himself to be the one that sinned. And he says, and he doesn't blame it on himself. He doesn't say, well, why didn't God answer my prayer? I mean, this would be like me praying and saying, you know, God, you know, I need to hear from you, Lord. Me praying a prayer and then God not answering my prayer and me saying, God didn't answer my prayer because Pete did something wrong, you know, or Lonnie did something wrong. I mean, Saul's prayer was not answered. And what does he do? He's blaming somebody else. And so that's another one that is just he said, bring all my commanders here. We need to find out what sin was committed today. Verse 39, I vow by the name of the Lord who rescued Israel that the sinner will surely die. So here's the second vow that he makes. He says, I vow in the name of the Lord. I mean, there's no reason for him to vow in the name of the Lord that somebody's going to die because his prayer wasn't answered. But he's out there, he's trying to look good in front of other people. This certainly isn't my fault, but the person whose fault it is, I vow in the name of the Lord that they're going to die. And just a small lesson here. I think it's always important that we be careful with what we promise. You know, he makes 3 vows in here, and I mean, if we promise something, we got to really make sure that we're going to do it. I try not to promise people stuff because if I promise people, I mean, I really got to do it. But I will try to do that. I hope I can do that. You know, whatever it is. I mean, it's a big deal when you say, I promise that I'm going to do that. I see my wife is on here now, and yesterday I told her that I would take some trash out today, and I haven't done it yet. So I will do that. I didn't promise her I would do that though, but I did say that I'd do. So I'll make sure to do that when I get home today. Um, but he ends it with this: even if it is my own son Jonathan, and listen to this. He says, I vow in the name of the Lord who rescued Israel that the sinner will surely die, even if it is my own son Jonathan. My own son Jonathan. But no one would tell him what the trouble was. Nobody was like, all the people were like, and I'm not going to tell you. We're not going to tell you that Jonathan ate that, you know. We're not, because we think Jonathan was right in doing that. And here's a lesson: when you're not hearing from God and your community's not talking to you, you probably just need to stop where you are and quit acting. You know, it's probably a time that you need to start waiting and waiting on the Lord to see what the Lord does. Because, I mean, if we're praying and we're asking God for guidance and all this stuff, hear nothing, and our community, the people that are around us, they're not offering any advice, it's probably a pretty good chance that we probably just need to stop and wait and wait on the Lord and practice waiting. Then Saul said to Jonathan, Jonathan, I will stand over here and all of you stand over there. So Saul in his mind is, there is no way that I'm at fault here. And there's no way that Jonathan's at fault here, because Jonathan's the one that started this. He's my son. He went out and defeated the people and got this whole thing running. So it's not our fault. So it's either y'all or it's not us. And so Jonathan and I will stand over here and y'all will all stand over there. And the people responded again, well, whatever you think is best. Then Saul prayed again. Okay, here Saul is. He prayed a prayer earlier, didn't get an answer. He didn't get an answer. So he prays again. Oh Lord God of Israel, please show us who is guilty and who is innocent. And he's doing this for show. I mean, because he just prayed and his prayer wasn't answered. So now he prays again and he says, hey, show us who's guilty. And whoever's guilty, I'll even if it's my son Jonathan, I'll kill him. So of course, God is not answering his prayer here. He didn't answer the first prayer, so what makes you think that he's going to answer the second prayer? Then they cast lots, and Jonathan and Saul were chosen as the guilty ones. So it's a 50-50 chance. Is it these people over here or is it us? 50-50. Oh my goodness, it's us. And then they cast lots again. So then the people were taken as innocent. Saul and Jonathan were taken. When it says guilty, if it says guilty in your text, in your Bible, that's not what's in the Hebrew. It says taken. It says taken. And so it wasn't that God was declaring them guilty here. It's just when they flipped the coin or they cast the lots, when it says taken, that means that the lot fell to that person. And so Saul says, well, I know it's not me, so cast lots again and choose between me and Jonathan. And Jonathan was taken by the lot. And if you've read the story, you know Jonathan wasn't guilty. Saul's the one that caused the people to sin. Saul was the one who prayed the prayers, and his prayers weren't answered. So Saul says, tell me what you have done, Saul demanded of Jonathan. I tasted a little honey. Jonathan admitted it was only a little bit on the end of my stick. Does that deserve death? And then his dad says, yes, Jonathan. Saul said, you must die. And notice that here he doesn't say, yes, my son, Jonathan. You know, earlier he said, even if it's my son, Jonathan. And so often he says, my son, he refers to Jonathan as my son, Jonathan, or my son. And this time he says, yes, Jonathan, you must die. And so here's his third one. May God strike me and even kill me if you do not die for this. So he made 3 vows this day. 1, nobody can eat. 2, the person that did this is responsible for this is going to die today. 3, I'm going to die if Jonathan doesn't. Now he makes and this is all him puffing up, trying to look better than he really is. Because God didn't strike him down dead that day. You know, I mean, God clearly is not listening to Saul right now. His prayers aren't being answered, and God didn't strike him down, because this is what happens. But the people broke in and said to Saul, Jonathan has won this great victory for Israel. Should he die? Far from it. As surely as the Lord lives, not one hair on his head will be touched, for God helped him do a great deed today. And Saul probably didn't like hearing that the people recognized that Jonathan was the one that won the battle, and that God did a great thing through him today and not through them. But they were the ones that were having to run around starving themselves and fight all night and all this stuff. So the people intervened and they saved Jonathan. So the people rescued Jonathan and he was not put to death. And it should also say, and Saul didn't get struck dead by God, because right now God's not listening to the pleas of and the oaths that Saul's making right now. Then Saul called back the army from chasing the Philistines, and the Philistines returned home. So all the Philistines weren't wiped out, and they probably should have been wiped out. But why weren't they wiped out? Because the people weren't able to eat. They didn't have enough energy. They stayed up late, all that stuff. So that's where we are today, and that's where we'll end it today. But y'all got any questions or comments on that? Anything stand out to y'all? Y'all online? Anything y'all see? I found it interesting. Go ahead. You look like you're about to say something. Okay.
You're expecting from the drop dead with all the things you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. God's gonna put him to the purpose. I know that God knows everything